All right, welcome everyone to the Shape Partners Cancer Caregiver Series. Today we have Michelle Munasami here, who is a distant cancer caregiver. She was a cancer caregiver for her mom. And we are going to start off just by hearing Michelle's story as to how she became a cancer caregiver and just give us some details about her experience. So Michelle, I'm going to pass it to you.
Okay. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy. Thank you. So yes, like you said, I was a distant caregiver for my mom. It seems like a few years ago, but also seems like forever ago. And I used to think of myself like almost as a respite for my sister, who was the full-time caregiver. And the reason why, and she was my younger sister also, the reason why I was a respite is because, like you said, I was a distant caregiver. My mom was back in Boston and my sister was living with her at the time. And I was here in Connecticut with my own family, own career, and own life, basically. So the way that I found that I could support my mother and my sister was by going to all of her chemo appointments with her. Any checkups that she had, I would pack up me and my infant at the time, and we would hit the highway first thing in the morning and either meet them at the house or meet them at the hospital. And we did that throughout her whole treatment. And then she was in remission. So then she was able to travel back and forth. So we had her come stay with us and give my sister a break because she's my younger sister who was actually in grad school. I think she was in grad school at the time. So, you know, and she's the person who kind of did everything back to back. So imagine being in your early 20s and the roles have reversed and you're caring for your mother. So I tried to do what I could do. And as soon as my mom was done with her appointments, I brought her over here and she stayed with us. And we would just travel back and forth when she had appointments until the cancer came back. And then it was, okay, you need to stay in Boston again. And then just kind of repeated the cycle until she got put into a hospice home, which at that point, you know, we weren't able to be with her. I wasn't able to be with her as much as I was when she was going to chemo, but every weekend, me and the kids, we would drive up there and just be there from sun up to sundown.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. What was the biggest challenge being a distant caregiver for your mom?
The distance, the guilt, you know, and just the unexpectedness of it all. As adults, we know that there's going to be a time where roles are going to be reversed and we're going to have to care for our parents. I wasn't thinking about that while I was in I wasn't even 30 yet. Yeah, I wasn't even 30 yet. My mother, she was mid-50s. So it wasn't anything that I really mentally prepared for. So when we heard the diagnosis and what that would look like, it was just, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Like, how can I support her? Because I know for a fact that if the roles were reversed, she would have dropped everything and been there for me. And I couldn't do that because, like I said, I had just had a baby and I had two other children who were school aged. So I couldn't just drop everything and go to Boston. So it was that. It was just feeling guilty. It was feeling guilty, feeling bad, feeling like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, like I wasn't being the firstborn. You know, you're firstborn, you're supposed to play a certain role, and I'm leaving it to my sister who is like not even 20. Like, she can't do anything, right? And you know, so it was guilt and anger because since I can't do it, now I'm gonna nitpick everything that my sister is doing, which wasn't helping anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes it hard because a cancer diagnosis, no one's really prepared for that.
Right.
So when your family's diagnosed with cancer, your whole routine, your whole day, everything is just really disrupted. So it's really hard to kind of how do you fit that into your day-to-day, right? You're working, the kids are going to school, you have a newborn, you have your own family, and then you're far away. So
Right.
totally understandable. Where did you go for resources? Like, where did you look up anything? Did you try to reach out for help or support? Where did you go, if you went anywhere?
I didn't go anywhere, to be honest. It wasn't until, yeah, I didn't go anywhere. It wasn't until the cancer came back, and we went to Dana-Farber in Boston, for Beth Israel Hospital in Boston. And it was like the Cancer Institute, like this was their focus. So it wasn't until then that I started hearing about like really cancer support groups and different resources and just all that stuff. But it wasn't necessarily for me, it was for my mom. So it was things to support her in that process. And I don't think I necessarily was thinking about what I needed in that time, because, you know, for me and my sister, I think we were both just going through the motions. It was like a rug was pulled out from under us. Everything was still going, and we're just like still trying to get the rug. So it wasn't until after my mom passed that we realized we needed more support than we had at the time.
So in retrospect, looking back.
Yeah. Because when you're in it, these are things that you have to do. And because, you know, our family is small, it was just my mother and sister in Boston. So they were limited with the resources that they had anyways, in terms of like familial support. And so my aunt, who's my mother's older sister, she dropped everything as soon as she could and helped her too. So it was like whenever each of us got a break, that's when you could be like, oh, I guess I did need this. But
Right.
then my aunt had to leave, or I would have to leave. And it's just like, well, I mean, you have to keep going. Like,
Yes, no, definitely, definitely. So where did you find like an outlet to, you know, while you're in it and you're kind of going, you're working, you're doing this, you're doing that. Where did you find the time to kind of just kind of check in with yourself and maybe talk to someone, or did you make that time or space for yourself?
a healthy person would be able to make time for those things. Yeah, I didn't. And I don't know. That's funny. Yeah, I didn't do those things. I think time for myself came on accident, and it wasn't even time for myself. I was in denial, and that again was in retrospect. I didn't realize how much in denial I was until after my mother passed away. I remember telling my husband I would have these dreams all the time, that we would go to an appointment and they'd be like, oh my God, we made a mistake. X-rays came back clear. There's nothing there. And it didn't click to me that meant that I needed to talk to somebody clearly. So yeah, like I didn't really have time for myself. The drive on the highway with my kids, where I would zone out and tears would come streaming down. Or like quiet moments, but that was really it. Or talking to friends, but it was, you know, I just, if I could avoid the topic, I did, and I would.
Right.
I don't know how helpful that was, but
Yeah.
at
And
that time.
you how did you stay in tune as to what was going on? So from time of diagnosis, the treatment plan, is there anything the healthcare team could have done differently to maybe kind of keep you informed, check in with you? Is there anything that could have helped you during that process?
Well, we had an APRN. Oh my God. I wish I could, her name is at the tip of my tongue. She was the best. I thought she was really great. She was super supportive. She was always touching base, always checking in. But it was more for my mom. Like she was checking in with us and how we were doing, but like, well, how's Julie? How's things going with her? Is she getting the resources that she needs? And I mean, at the time, like Julie's the patient. Well, yeah, of course. Like you have to check in with her. And I mean, I guess it came to a point where she was like, you guys are going to need like a visiting nurse. You're going to need someone to come to the house to help with certain things. And that was a form of support and checking in with my sister, because my sister was they were living together. But yeah, there was nothing really like, what are you guys doing for yourselves, or do you need anything? Here's a group that you guys could go and join. Just, have other people who are kind of going through the same things as you.
Right. Right. Do you think that would have changed your experience if you had resources provided to you, maybe at that level when you're in the visit with your mom?
I think it would have helped make me be a little more present. Because I know there was a lot of times that I was in my head. So if I would have had an outlet, just to hear other people who are kind of going through the same things. And although I had my sister who we could talk and bond, and we did, it was still different because this is my baby sister.
Right.
Like, I'm going to go cry on her shoulders about how bad I feel because I can't be there. Meanwhile, she's the one that's, waking up with her in the middle of the night if something's wrong with my mother, or canceling her plans, or not making any plans because she's got to go home and take care of my mom because it's Tuesday and it's 3:00 and she needs to eat. That's not something that I could do. So I think if there was a group and I was open enough and not in denial to actually join it and make use of it, because that's the other piece.
Right.
It's making time for that too, because that's something else.
Yes.
To do. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's so hard.
Yeah, no, understandable. And in the research, it shows that, cancer caregivers, their mental health and their physical health really decline when someone they love is diagnosed with cancer. Did you experience any of that?
Mental, yeah. I know I was definitely depressed. Like I said, I would snap at my sister. My depression came out in the form of anger. I was always snapping at my sister. We were arguing all the time. There are definitely lots of hang-ups. Snapping at my kids who were young. So, already young kids can push your buttons. But then when you add like stress and fear, because it wasn't even so much stress, it was fear. Fear that my mom isn't going to make it. Fear that I'm not going to be there. I'm going to miss something. So definitely put a strain on my relationship with my husband. But I think because he's in the healthcare field, he kind of understood that it wasn't like a personal thing. So he was able to kind of take a step back. But no, it mentally, yes. I don't know about physically if it did anything to me, but mentally and emotionally, everything was just going downhill. I don't even know how I functioned at work, to be honest. I actually ended up taking time off just so I could go back and forth, because it wasn't feasible to leave Connecticut to go to an appointment at 10:00 in the morning and still come back for work.
Yes. No, understandable. Now, being distant, did you feel like you were part of the healthcare team? Did you feel like they included you?
Yep. Always. We had conference calls. I guess if it was during this time, we would have been on Zoom calls. They definitely kept me in the loop. I didn't feel like disconnected in that way at all.
Okay. And you felt like you understood everything, the terms used, hospice versus palliative care, the diagnosis, treatment, end of care. Did you feel like you had the support to kind of, one, understand what they were talking about, and two, enough information to make the next decision?
Yes, I definitely feel like I understood. I wasn't in a place to make a decision because my mother was very much in her right mind and can make the decisions herself. So at one point I felt like I was in the middle because she was deciding to not move forward with one of the experimental drugs or trials. And so her doctor called me like, you know, this is what it is. This is what it could do. I'm not sure if she understands. Is there a way that you can call, you know, talk to her and make sure that she fully understands what she's opting out of? But, you know, I was just like, well, I don't really know how I'm going to change her mind. But
Right.
yes, whatever I can do, I will. So yeah, I felt like they definitely kept me in the loop and made sure like I understood what was going on and what would happen,
Yeah.
regardless which path she chose.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. And I think it's very commendable that the doctor called you to talk about the clinical trial to just make sure she understood, opposed to just saying, well, she doesn't understand or she's opting out and that's it. So
Yeah, no, they were great. Like they were my only real experience, but I'm glad it was with the APRN and the doctor at Dana-Farber. They're really good.
oh, awesome. And in retrospect, Michelle, thinking about your experience when your mom was going through treatment and transitioning, you know, to hospice, what could have helped you or made your experience better? What could have, you know, helped you and your sister?
Gosh, that's so hard because, you know, when you're a distant caregiver, it's different because you don't carry even half of the load that the person who is caring for your loved one full time does. So, like, I mean, even now, and I'm still very much carrying a lot of guilt. So it's hard for me to say what would have been helpful for me now, because it's like, okay, like you had the weekends. Okay, you took FMLA for, you know, however many months. But I don't, I feel like I can't even formulate what would be helpful because it just doesn't compare to the load that someone who's caring for someone full time would need.
Right. No, I understand that, but you know, so when you say load, I think of mental and physical, right? So you know, comparing the two, which you know, your feelings that you had being distant are still very valid, and you know, you can't really take away from that when you compare to your sisters. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So still very valid. You know, that mental load can be very comparable. Even you know, yours could be heavier, but it's not comparing. It's just kind of standing in, you know, what you feel. So I want you to know that you know what you're feeling is valid, even though you may have some guilt there. It's still important. Now, after you know your mom passed, and how are you doing now with everything? How are you dealing with your guilt that you said you have?
Oh, you know, I'm dealing with it like any unhealthy person would. You know, you pack it up in a pretty little box and I put it in the back of my closet and I go through it every once in a while and then I put it back away because you know I don't know what to do with it. I mean, so I'm a therapist and I know what to do with it, right? I know that I need to go and talk to somebody and process and just come to terms with all of it, but I don't because that would just make too much sense. But what I will say, I think what stopped me was when my mom did pass and I was looking for support groups so that I could help my kids like deal with the loss because they lost their grandmother who was very much involved in their lives, very much a part of who they are. And I just needed some support with where to go and how to just kind of go about talking about it with them. And I remember getting told that one of the groups that came recommended was for like younger kids and not necessarily for someone my age. And it was for children who lost their parents. So like even my kids wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for that group because the kids who were in there had lost, you know, one of their parents. And there just wasn't any adult groups that like adult grief groups at the time, which now I think is a little absurd. But I probably just didn't know where to look. And I guess that's why having like a resource for caregivers would have been helpful, because perhaps they would have been able to kind of point me in the right direction, because cancer doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter how old you are. Like,
No,
somebody
very true. And where did you look for that resource? Was it online? Was it?
online.
Yeah.
So I probably didn't even type the right thing. You have to be so precise with these search engines, especially if you're looking for something. So again, if you're not in the right field, like the right area, you're just gonna come up short every time.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember if they gave me anything in terms for like support, like the aftermath. That's something that I would have to check in with my sister, but I wonder, they probably gave it to her because she was the full-time caregiver. I was on the sidelines, like I was removed from the situation. And I remember feeling like that sometimes, which is why I think that I didn't really matter as much, because I was on the sidelines. It was more her. And as I'm talking about it more, I think the reason why I was so much a part of the phone calls and appointments is because my sister deferred those things to me. Because like I said, she was young. She didn't know what was going on. And it was too much for her. So had she took on that, I probably wouldn't have been in the loop, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yes, yes. No, that's very interesting. And, a lot of caregivers say that after, their loved one has had cancer, went through treatment, transitioned to hospice, and pass away, that they're like totally disconnected from the healthcare team. Like everything just kind of disappears and you're on your own. Did you feel that? Or have you two talked about that?
We haven't talked about it. And yes, we did feel, I did feel that way. Like as soon as she got put into the hospice home, we were Doctor Who, APRN, everybody was gone. And thankfully, and I mean, I guess she worked there for a reason. The social worker at the hospice home, she was wonderful. She was such a support person. And to this day, she will send messages to check in here and there. And she was awesome. But I mean, I guess now I think about like hospice, like that's what they were supposed to do, I guess. So I don't know. But yeah, no, everything was done with the healthcare, like with the APRN and the doctor, once she transitioned over into the hospice home.
Yeah. So you had like no constant support, like from time of day.
Same person, no.
Transition is yeah. So I hear a lot of that too, that it's very segmented. And then at some point you're just kind of on your own. It's kind of like fend for yourself because your loved one's not really affiliated with this healthcare system anymore.
No, exactly. And it's like, you don't want to keep retelling the story, like how you got here. Like, it's just, you do get to a point where you kind of just say, okay, so next stop. All right, who are you and what do you have for us? What are you going to tell us?
Yes. Now, how do you think a group would have helped you and your sister if you were in a group with caregivers, maybe talking about stress, how to manage your stress, check in, someone kind of holding you accountable, cheering you on, like just giving you that overall support throughout. Do you think that would have changed anything for you?
I think it would have normalized a lot of things and a lot of feelings. I think it would have, because when I think of support groups, you just hear like other people kind of going through the same things. And even what you said earlier, like kind of validating my feelings about, even though you're distant, like you still, like how you felt matters, your role still matters. I think hearing that would have been helpful, or being reminded of that, because I think it adds to the grieving. And it takes the grieving to a whole nother level, because there's already so many layers. And then like you just add guilt and shame to
all those boxes, right?
Yeah, it's just like, oh my goodness. So I think like having a constant there, like people to go with you through the motions, all the different stages, because it's not just their not their status, but like you know how cancer works. Like something changes every week, every appointment is something new, and it's not just that thing that changes, because now it's how our reaction is going to change. Like our schedule has to change, our life has to change, like everything changes. It's not just them who changes. And so when you can have that support to help you through those changes, because there would be times where I'd be stressed out and I'd catch myself, because now I'm kind of spilling everything to my mother because she was my person. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, how am I coming to her and like complaining to her? And she's the one who's got like these, it was just a mess. And the same thing with my sister. How could I complain or vent to her when she's doing a brunt of the work? How can I complain, not even complain, like vent or talk with my husband, because he doesn't really get it. Like, you have your mother, you have your father, like you don't understand. So, you know, I think a support group with people who are going through what you're going through would have been helpful, because then you could just share freely.
Yes.
And not feel bad for it, not feel ashamed, not feel guilty, like not feel like a terrible person.
Right. Yeah, because they understand you guys are all in it, or they've been there, so they can really understand what you're going through. You know, that's very very important. So if you were talking to a caregiver who's going through what you went through, what are three pieces of advice that you would give them to help them on their journey?
Oh, geez. Don't do anything that I did. Wow. I would say I would encourage them to take time to slow down. Because when you are a distant caregiver and you're trying to be on top of everything, there's no time to slow down. So then you really are just going through the motions and you miss so much. You miss time with your loved one, you know, because you're not being present. So just really being able to just find pockets, because you're not going to be with, I wish, you know, when my mom was getting her treatment and I had to sit in the waiting room, I would have taken advantage of that time to just like woo-saw a little bit, like do some deep breathings, or just do something for myself, just so I could kind of get back into my shift. Like, okay, I'm ready for you. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? So slowing down, talking more, because as much as I can say, you know, I felt bad talking to my sister or talking to my husband or talking to my friends, when people tell you that they are here for you and they open the door for you to talk with them and share things with them and they check in on you, take advantage, because they're saying it for a reason. They care about you. So let them know. They check in, you're not doing well, just say you're not doing well. Instead of, you know, putting a smile on your face and, you know, saying everything is fine because you don't think they'll understand. Because whether or not they understand, they know that you need a space to talk and let things out. If they're offering it, take it. If it becomes too much, they'll stop asking you. And I mean, do the best that you can and not feel guilty about it, because it's better than nothing. Like, I wish I didn't waste so much time beating myself up for what I should have been doing, what I could be doing more of, while I was with her doing what I was doing.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good advice. Good advice. So something I talked to a client with is golden moments. That's what it sounded like the first one, really capturing those golden moments, that time together. And the second one, you said spending time. I'm losing it. What was the second one?
When people ask you how you're doing, like talking to people.
Yeah, so really accepting that, right? So someone comes to you, say, do you need help? Or giving you their ear or shoulder, really take them up on it, and then realize that you are doing your best.
Right.
Not beating yourself up. So that is really, really, really good advice for.
I wish I could have said it as concise as you said it. I used too many words. But yes, what you said.
I was summing it up. I was trying to sum it up. Like, okay, yeah. So those that's really, really, really important, and I think it'll really help caregivers who are going through it. So thank you so much for your time. Is there any parting words you want to give us as we wrap this up and end this session?
I mean, I think what you're doing and what you're offering is like a golden nugget. And if people have the opportunity, whether former or current caregivers, to join and be a part of a community that really understands what you're going through. Because the advice that I gave, again, when you're in it, that feeling of they don't understand is what kept me from opening up to people who I knew really cared about me, really were interested in me, cared about my mother, were willing to hear me out, wanted to hear me out. And so if you don't want to talk to those people because you don't feel like they'll understand, or you don't want to put your burden, you don't want to add any burden to them, then go to a community who really understands what's going on, where you won't feel guilty, kind of just vomiting and letting it out so that you can move on.
Yes.
And move forward.
No,
so I think this is an awesome resource. I wish this was around back with my mother, for me and my sister, because I think, you know, we both would have benefited from it. And like I said, we probably would have avoided a lot of arguments, especially on my end, because I was the one with the guilt and the anger. So I wish this was something that was available.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's here now, and you're a part of it, so that's great. That's great, and it's never too late. That I always say, it's never too late, because we're still here. We can still, you know, try to be better, do better, and give. You know.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle, for your time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.